Have you ever wondered what lengths a person might go to preserve their bloodline? What terrible bargains might be struck behind the closed doors of antebellum mansions, where wealth and legacy outweighed all human dignity? In the murky bayous of St. Martin Parish, Louisiana, during the humid summer of 1856, a discovery was made that would reveal one of the darkest chapters in American history, a chapter that some powerful families have worked tirelessly to erase from public memory. Yet fragments remain, preserved in forgotten archives, personal diaries, and the whispered stories passed down through generations of those who survived. The Bellerose Plantation stood as a monument to wealth and power along the banks of Bayou Teche, its white columns rising like sentinels against the lush green landscape. To passing riverboats, it appeared as a vision of southern prosperity. Over 800 acres of sugarcane fields, a magnificent three-story main house, and numerous outbuildings that housed the operations of one of Louisiana's most productive sugar plantations. What those riverboats could not see, however, was the elaborate system of control and manipulation that existed behind Bellerose's immaculate facade. At the center of this system was widow Eleanor Bellerose, who had inherited the plantation following her husband's unexpected death in 1849. According to parish records, Richard Bellerose had succumbed to yellow fever during an outbreak that claimed dozens of lives throughout the region. The plantation's ledgers, preserved in the Louisiana State Archives, show that within 3 years of her husband's passing, Eleanor Bellerose had not only maintained the plantation's productivity, but had increased its profits by nearly 30%. Mrs. Bellerose was unlike any other plantation mistress in the parish, wrote Father Thomas Guidry, the local Catholic priest, in a letter to his bishop dated October 1854. She conducts business with a sharpness that unnerves the gentleman planters, yet maintains such a refined appearance in society that none dare question her methods. I confess I find something unsettling in her gaze, a coldness that belies her charitable donations to our parish fund. What Father Guidry could not have known when he penned those words was the true extent of Eleanor Bellerose's ruthlessness, nor the strange obsession that drove her every decision. It would take the investigative efforts of Federal Marshal James Hathaway, sent to Louisiana in the tumultuous pre-war period of 1860, to begin piecing together the horrifying truth. Hathaway had been dispatched to investigate rumors of illegal slave importation, but what he uncovered was something far more disturbing. The first indication that something unusual was occurring at Bellerose Plantation came from the parish records of St. Martinville. Between 1852 and 1856, Eleanor Bellerose had purchased an unusually high number of enslaved persons, specifically young men and women between the ages of 16 and 25. More curious still was the premium price she paid, often 50% above market value, for individuals with specific physical characteristics. Marshal Hathaway's official report, filed with the Department of Justice in Washington and later classified until 1947, noted, "Mrs. Bellerose's acquisitions follow a pattern that cannot be explained by agricultural necessity. She specifically sought individuals of exceptional height, with light complexions and particular facial features that bear a striking resemblance to her late husband's family." The true nature of Eleanor Bellerose's activities might have remained hidden if not for the chance discovery made by Hathaway in the attic of the St. Martinville courthouse. There, in a forgotten trunk of miscellaneous documents, he found the private journal of Dr. Philip Mercier, the plantation physician who had attended to the Bellerose family and their enslaved workforce for over 2 decades. Mercier's journal, spanning the years 1848 to 1857, revealed a disturbing preoccupation with what he termed hereditary science and selective reproduction. His entries grew increasingly troubled as he documented Eleanor Bellerose's grand design, a design that had begun even before her husband's death. March 15, 1849. I can no longer maintain my silence regarding what transpires at Bellerose. RB's condition worsens daily, and I now suspect foul play. The symptoms do not align with yellow fever, but rather suggest gradual arsenic poisoning. EB prevents me from altering his treatment and watches my every move when I am in his presence. What troubles me most is her constant questioning about his family's physical characteristics and her obsession with preserving what she calls the Bellerose bloodline. She speaks of it with religious fervor, though RB and EB have been unable to produce any children of their own. Subsequent entries in Dr. Mercier's journal described how, following Richard Bellerose's death, Eleanor began systematically purchasing enslaved people who resembled members of her husband's family. She sought out individuals with the distinctive Bellerose features, tall stature, hazel eyes, high cheekbones, and the auburn hair that had been characteristic of the French-descended family for generations. August 20, 1852. Today EB revealed to me her grand design. She believes the Bellerose line possesses superior qualities that must not be lost to history. In the absence of a legitimate heir, she has conceived a plan to create what she calls proper matches among those she has selected for their resemblance to the family. She speaks of bloodlines and breeding as though discussing prized horses. I reminded her that such arrangements would produce children who would legally be considered enslaved. She merely smiled and said, "For now, Doctor." For now." What followed over the next 4 years was a calculated program of forced marriages, meticulously documented in a leather-bound ledger that Eleanor Bellerose kept separate from the plantation's official records. This ledger, which Marshall Hathaway would eventually discover concealed in a hidden compartment of Eleanor's writing desk, contained detailed information about 12 marriages that Eleanor had arranged between 1852 and 1856. Each entry included physical measurements, family histories as far as could be traced, and even crude diagrams of facial features that Eleanor considered representative of the Bellerose lineage. The enslaved individuals were given new names upon their arrival at the plantation, all derived from Bellerose family names going back 3 generations. Josephine Dufresne, who had been a house servant at Bellerose from 1843 until she escaped north in 1858, provided testimony to abolitionists in Philadelphia that corroborated the evidence found in the hidden ledger. Mistress would line up the new ones she brought in, men and women both, in the back parlor where nobody but her closest associates could see. She'd walk around them like she was at a horse auction, measuring their limbs with a tape, examining their teeth, asking questions about their parents and grandparents. Then she'd match them up, announcing who would be married to whom. There wasn't no real ceremony, just her declaration, and afterward, those chosen were moved to special cabins away from the rest of us. Better cabins with real beds and windows, but they was watched day and night by the overseer or his men. Josephine's account was later supported by similar testimonies from 3 other former Bellerose enslaved people who had managed to escape north. Their stories painted a picture of a plantation where Eleanor Bellerose had essentially created a breeding program disguised as privileged treatment for select individuals. The most disturbing aspects of Eleanor's scheme came to light through fragments of her personal correspondence with a cousin in France, discovered among her papers after federal troops occupied the plantation during the Civil War. In these letters, written in French and later translated by military interpreters, she outlined her vision for what she called La Nouvelle Lignée Bellerose, the new Bellerose line. "My dearest Matilda," she wrote in 1854, "you express concern over my methods, but you fail to understand the grand purpose behind them. The Bellerose blood carries greatness within it, the intellect, strength, and refinement that has distinguished our family for centuries. I could not bear to see it diluted and eventually extinguished merely because Richard and I were denied children of our own. What I create here is a continuation of his legacy through carefully selected vessels. In time, when the results of my experiment prove successful, certain arrangements can be made to ensure these children receive their rightful place. The laws of Louisiana are flexible for those with means and foresight. The arrangements Eleanor alluded to appeared to involve plans to eventually free and legally recognize selected offspring from her forced marriages, particularly those who most strongly exhibited Bellerose family traits. Her correspondence with several influential lawyers in New Orleans discussed complex legal strategies for establishing inheritance rights for individuals of mixed ancestry, all without explicitly stating her true intentions. By 1856, the year identified in later investigations as the date of the auction mentioned in surviving documents, Eleanor Bellerose had arranged a total of 12 marriages among her specially selected enslaved people. The first children from these unions were beginning to be born, and Eleanor's private papers show an obsessive attention to their development. The event referred to as the Horrifying auction was not, as might be assumed, a public slave auction, but rather a private gathering held at Bellerose Plantation in June 1856. Invitations discovered in the personal effects of several prominent Louisiana families revealed that Eleanor had invited 26 wealthy planters and their wives to what she described as a special exhibition of hereditary science and future prosperity. One surviving invitation, currently preserved in the Museum of Southern History in New Orleans, reads, "Mrs. Eleanor Bellerose requests the honor of your presence for an exclusive demonstration of progressive agricultural management and human resources development at Bellerose Plantation, Saturday, June 14, 1856. Discretion is kindly requested regarding the advanced nature of the techniques to be displayed. What actually transpired at this gathering was reconstructed years later through the reluctant testimony of Gertrude Fontaine, the widow of one of the attendees, who provided a deposition during a post-war investigation into wartime property claims. It was the most appalling display I have ever witnessed. Mrs. Bellerose had arranged the central parlor with chairs in rows, as though for a theatrical performance. After serving refreshments, she announced that she would demonstrate a new approach to plantation continuity that would revolutionize our way of life. She then had her butler bring in several infants and young children, all carefully dressed in fine clothes. Behind each child stood a man and woman, the parents, I presumed, also well-dressed but clearly enslaved persons. Mrs. Fontaine's testimony continued. Eleanor proceeded to describe each child as though they were prize livestock, detailing their parentage, physical development, and what she called their Bellerose qualities. She spoke of bloodlines and selective traits with an unnatural enthusiasm that disturbed even the most hardened planters in attendance. When she announced that these children represented the future of Southern society and that similar programs could be established on other plantations, several guests departed immediately. My husband and I remained only long enough to avoid giving offense, but we never returned to Bellerose nor spoke to Eleanor in society again. The most chilling aspect of the gathering was revealed in Eleanor's private journal, where she recorded the evening as a tremendous success, noting that 3 of the attending planters had expressed interest in her methods and requested private consultations to discuss implementing similar arrangements on their own plantations. "They see the wisdom in my approach," she wrote. Though some lack the courage to acknowledge it publicly, the future belongs to those who take control of nature's processes rather than leaving them to chance. The Bellerose bloodline will not only continue but multiply across the finest plantations of Louisiana. My Richard's legacy will live on through dozens, perhaps hundreds, of carefully crafted heirs. The full extent of Eleanor Bellerose's succession program might never have come to light if not for an unexpected revelation in 1857. Marie Bellerose, Richard's younger sister who had been living in France for nearly a decade, returned to Louisiana upon learning disturbing rumors about her sister-in-law's activities. Marie's arrival at Bellerose Plantation in April 1857 triggered a confrontation that would eventually expose Eleanor's scheme to local authorities. According to the sworn statement of Harriet Miller, Eleanor's personal maid, Marie Bellerose, was initially denied entry to the plantation, but forced her way in with the assistance of the parish sheriff, whom she had wisely visited first with her concerns. Miss Marie came storming into the house with Sheriff Taylor right behind her, demanding to see what her brother's widow had been doing with the Bellerose name and fortune. When they found Mistress Eleanor in the nursery with the children from her special program, Miss Marie became hysterical, screaming that her sister-in-law had created an abomination. The sheriff looked like he'd seen a ghost when Mistress explained her project to them, showing off the children like they were prize calves and pointing out which ones had the true Bellerose chin or the family's intellectual brow. Marie Bellerose immediately petitioned the parish court for an investigation into her sister-in-law's management of the estate, claiming that Eleanor was mentally unfit to administer her late brother's property. The legal proceedings that followed were quickly sealed by order of Judge William Marchand, a close associate of several planters who had attended Eleanor's exhibition. Sheriff Taylor's official report, which was included in the sealed court records but later discovered during reconstruction, described finding a disturbing arrangement wherein certain enslaved individuals were being selectively paired for the purpose of producing offspring with specific physical characteristics, resembling the late Mr. Bellerose. The children resulting from these arrangements, now numbering 17 in total, are being raised under unusual conditions in a segregated nursery within the main house. What happened next remains a subject of historical debate. The court records indicate that Judge Marchand dismissed Marie Bellerose's petition and ordered her to return to France within 30 days. Eleanor was placed under the nominal guardianship of her late husband's cousin, Gerard Bellerose, but all evidence suggests this was merely a formality that allowed her to continue her activities with minimal interference. However, rumors spread throughout St. Martin Parish and beyond. The reputation of Bellerose Plantation darkened, and Eleanor found herself increasingly isolated from society. Several prominent families refused invitations to her Christmas ball in 1857, and business associates began to distance themselves from financial ventures associated with Bellerose Holdings. In February 1858, a mysterious fire broke out in the separate quarters where the special enslaved families were housed. 3 adults and 2 children perished in the blaze. The official investigation concluded that an unattended cooking fire was to blame, but suspicions of deliberate arson lingered. Some speculated that Eleanor herself had ordered the fire to eliminate evidence of her activities. Others believed outraged community members had taken matters into their own hands. Following the fire, Eleanor accelerated her plans. According to plantation records, she sold off a significant portion of her sugar-producing land and began liquidating other assets. Correspondence with lawyers in New Orleans and Paris suggests she was preparing to relocate her project away from increasingly hostile Louisiana society. A letter from Eleanor to her banker in New Orleans, dated July 1858, stated, "Make arrangements to transfer the majority of my assets to the Paris account. I anticipate requiring significant funds for an extended stay abroad, beginning this autumn. The agricultural operations here will continue under management, but my personal residence will be established elsewhere for the foreseeable future." However, Eleanor Bellerose never completed her planned relocation. On September 3, 1858, she was found dead in her bedchamber, a seemingly peaceful death that was attributed to heart failure by the local doctor who was called to the scene. No autopsy was performed, and she was quickly buried in the Bellerose family cemetery on the plantation grounds. Marie Bellerose, upon learning of Eleanor's death, returned from France to claim her brother's estate as his only surviving blood relative. What she discovered upon her return was that most of the enslaved people who had been part of Eleanor's program had vanished, along with the children born from the arranged marriages. The plantation's records showed a massive sale to an unnamed buyer just 3 days before Eleanor's death, but no further documentation could be found to trace the individual's whereabouts. In her personal diary, which now resides in the Louisiana Historical Society's archives, Marie wrote, "I have returned to find Richard's legacy in ruins and the monstrous experiment apparently concluded. Yet I cannot escape the feeling that Eleanor's death was too convenient, too perfectly timed, and where are the poor souls she used in her ungodly scheme? The overseer claims ignorance, the house servants speak in frightened whispers, and the neighboring planters avoid my questions. I fear this abomination has not ended but merely changed form." Marie's suspicions would prove prophetic. In 1862, as Union forces advanced into Louisiana, a federal agent named Samuel Blackwood was dispatched to investigate rumors of unusual activity at a remote compound near the Louisiana-Texas border. His report, filed under military intelligence and declassified only in 1973, described discovering a carefully concealed establishment housing approximately 40 individuals, primarily young adults and children, who appear to be the subjects of some manner of selective breeding program. Documentation found on site connects this operation to the late Eleanor Bellerose of St. Martin Parish and indicates ongoing financial support from unnamed benefactors in New Orleans society. The compound was abandoned by the time Union forces arrived to investigate further, but items left behind, including personal journals, medical records, and what appeared to be a genealogical chart, suggested that Eleanor's project had continued after her death, now directed by unknown individuals who shared her obsession with the Bellerose bloodline. As the Civil War consumed the nation's attention, the scattered pieces of Eleanor's human breeding program faded into obscurity. The Bellerose plantation was confiscated by Union forces, later returned to Marie Bellerose during Reconstruction, and eventually sold to northern investors who converted the land to diversified farming operations. The main house burned to the ground in 1876, erasing the physical center of Eleanor's horrifying experiment. Yet fragments of the story continued to emerge over subsequent decades. In 1884, a physician in New Orleans published an anonymous article in a medical journal describing his encounter with a secretive community living on the outskirts of the city. They number perhaps 100 individuals, all sharing distinctive physical characteristics despite their varied skin tones. They refer to themselves as les héritiers, the heirs, and maintain careful records of their lineage. Their elder members speak of a founding mother who selected their ancestors for specific traits and arranged their family lines to preserve what they believe to be superior qualities. They practice a form of arranged marriage that perpetuates these traits and maintain a quasi-religious devotion to what they call the original bloodline. The physician's account was largely dismissed as sensationalism or folklore, but similar reports would occasionally surface throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, isolated communities in Louisiana, East Texas, and even as far away as Mexico, all sharing unusual physical similarities and practicing strict control over marriage and reproduction. In 1923, an amateur genealogist named Frederick Winters published a limited circulation monograph titled The Scattered Seeds, tracing the Bellerose diaspora, in which he claimed to have identified over 30 families across the southern United States and Caribbean whose ancestry could be traced to Eleanor Bellerose's breeding program. Winters' work was largely ignored by mainstream historians, but developed a cult following among conspiracy theorists and those interested in the darker aspects of plantation-era eugenics. The most compelling evidence that Eleanor's project extended far beyond her lifetime came in 1941, when federal investigators examining suspected Nazi sympathizers in Louisiana discovered correspondence between a wealthy New Orleans businessman named Thomas LaRue and German eugenicists. The letters referenced the ongoing American experiment begun by E.B. in 1852 and offered to share 8 decades of hereditary data demonstrating the viability of controlled bloodline preservation. LaRue committed suicide before he could be thoroughly questioned, but documents found in his possession included detailed records of individuals descended from Eleanor's original 12 arranged marriages, now entering their 4th and 5th generations. These records showed an organizational structure that had evolved from Eleanor's crude beginnings into a sophisticated network that maintained bloodline records while operating beneath the surface of respectable society. Dr. Eliza Montgomery, a historian who gained access to the LaRue papers in the 1970s, wrote, "What began as one disturbed woman's obsession with her husband's family line appears to have evolved into a multi-generational eugenics project operating in the shadows of American society. The individuals involved may not even recognize the true origins of their family traditions, or understand that they are participating in perhaps the longest-running, unauthorized human breeding experiment in modern history. The full extent of Eleanor Bellarose's legacy remains unknown. Official records were deliberately destroyed, witnesses silenced, and evidence obscured by those who continued her work after her death. What is clear is that her horrifying auction of 1856, where she proudly displayed the first results of her breeding program to fellow planters, was merely the public revelation of a scheme that had already been in operation for years and would continue long after she was gone. Today, the former site of Belrose Plantation is private farmland, with no marker to indicate the atrocities conceived there. The surrounding communities rarely speak of the Belrose name or the rumors that have persisted for over a century and a half. Yet occasionally, local residents report encountering strangers who ask unusual questions about old plantation families and take particular interest in birth records from the mid-19th century. In 2012, a graduate student researching her dissertation on plantation architecture reported a strange encounter with an elderly man who approached her while she was photographing the remains of the Belrose family cemetery. He asked if I was researching the Belrose family and seemed pleased when I said I was only interested in the structural design of their buildings. Before leaving, he commented that Eleanor's vision continues to flourish, though few recognize her contribution. When I asked what he meant, he smiled and said, "The bloodline endures. We number in the thousands now across continents, yet still maintain the qualities she selected. The great work continues." The student dismissed the encounter as the ramblings of a local eccentric, but her account aligns disturbingly well with scattered reports collected by folklorists and conspiracy researchers over the decades. These reports suggest the existence of a loosely connected network of individuals who trace their origins to Eleanor's program and continue to practice some form of selective marriage to maintain what they believe to be superior genetic traits. Could descendants of Eleanor Bellarose's twisted experiment be living among us today, still following the principles she established in the shadows of a Louisiana plantation? Are there communities that continue to arrange marriages based on hereditary charts begun in 1856, perpetuating a eugenics program conceived in the darkest days of American slavery? The official records offer no definitive answers, having been systematically purged or sealed by those with the power and motivation to hide the truth. What remains certain is that the 12 marriages Eleanor Bellarose arranged in 1856 were merely the foundation of something that grew far beyond her original vision, a horror that may continue to spread its tendrils through American society, hidden in plain sight, its origins obscured by time, but its purpose unchanged. And perhaps most disturbing of all, if you have ties to Louisiana, Texas, or the Gulf Coast, if your family history includes mysterious gaps or inconsistencies during the 19th century, if you possess distinctive physical features that seem to run with unusual consistency through your family line, you might unknowingly be part of Eleanor Bellarose's enduring legacy. The blood of her special project may flow in your veins, carrying forward an experiment begun more than 160 years ago on a sugar plantation along Bayou Teche. What would you do if you discovered your family tree had been deliberately cultivated, your ancestors selected and paired like prized cattle? How would you reconcile your identity, knowing it was manufactured through a calculated program of human breeding? These questions haunt the scattered descendants of what historians now refer to as the Bellarose experiment, though few are aware of their connection to one of the most disturbing chapters in American eugenics. As federal troops withdrew from Louisiana following the Reconstruction era, the paper trail documenting Eleanor Bellarose's breeding program grew increasingly fragmented. The wealthy benefactors who had continued her work after her death in 1858 developed sophisticated methods to conceal their activities from public scrutiny. What had begun as a plantation mistress's obsession with preserving her husband's bloodline had evolved into something more insidious, a network dedicated to perpetuating what they believed to be superior genetic traits through controlled reproduction. The St. Landry Parish Gazette published a curious notice in March 1879 that, in retrospect, offers a glimpse into how the program operated in the post-war period. The Bellarose Educational Foundation announces scholarships for young men and women of exceptional promise, ages 16 to 21. Applicants must submit complete family histories for 3 generations and be willing to reside at the Foundation's campus for the duration of their studies. Physical examination required. According to records discovered in the 1930s, the Foundation maintained no actual educational facilities, but operated a secluded compound near the Texas-Louisiana border where selected students lived under strict supervision. Parish records show that between 1879 and 1893, the Foundation registered 27 marriages between its graduates, all carefully arranged based on detailed genealogical records tracing back to Eleanor's original 12 forced marriages. William Carrington, who briefly worked as a groundskeeper at the compound in 1882, provided a rare first-hand account in a letter to his sister. "I've left that strange place and won't return despite the good wages. They call it a school, but I never saw any classrooms, only extensive gardens where the young people work and socializing areas where they are encouraged to mingle under watchful eyes. The director, Dr. Gautier, keeps meticulous records on each resident and holds private meetings where he seems to suggest particular friendships between them. Most disturbing are the portraits lining the main hall, generations of similar-looking people, all with the same distinctive features. When I asked about them, I was told they represent the ideal toward which we strive. By the early 20th century, the original Bellarose experiment had splintered into several distinct branches, each maintaining the core principle of controlled breeding while adapting to changing social conditions. The most significant transformation came in 1907, when Thomas LaRue, the same man later discovered to have corresponded with German eugenicists, established the American Hereditary Improvement Society in New Orleans. LaRue's organization presented itself publicly as a scientific association dedicated to the betterment of American bloodlines through educational guidance and social reform. Its true purpose, as revealed in private documents, was to modernize Eleanor Bellarose's methods, applying emerging genetic theories to the ongoing breeding program while expanding its reach beyond the original Bellarose lineage. A confidential membership manual discovered among LaRue's papers outlined the society's structure. Our organization operates on 3 levels of understanding. Outer Circle members believe they are participating in a conventional eugenics society, promoting better marriage choices. Middle Circle members understand our work involves actively arranging advantageous marriages based on hereditary records, but remain unaware of our historical foundations. Only Inner Circle members, those descended from the original 12 pairs, know the full scope of our mission and the remarkable lineage we have maintained since 1856. The Society maintained extensive genealogical records, coded to conceal their true purpose. Each descendant of Eleanor's program received a classification indicating their degree of Bellerose traits and their suitability for various matched pairings. James Morrison, who infiltrated the Society while working for a private investigation agency in 1928, described their operational methods in his confidential report. They primarily target young people from families already connected to their network, though they occasionally recruit outsiders who exhibit what they call desirable Bellerose characteristics. The Society sponsors social events, summer retreats, and educational programs designed to bring compatible young people together in seemingly natural settings. By 1920, the Society claimed over 300 active members across 7 southern states, with satellite groups forming as far north as Chicago and as far west as San Francisco. Doctor. Behind this facade of innocent socialization, senior members carefully observe interactions and guide relationships toward predetermined matches. Morrison's report, sealed until 1972 due to the prominent families implicated, continued. Most disturbing is their patient timeline. They speak of the continuation as a multi-century project, with goals projected well into the 21st century. They maintain that by the 7th generation, which they expect to reach around 2030, the refined Bellerose line will have produced individuals of such superior capability that they will naturally assume positions of leadership throughout American society. The Great Depression and World War II forced significant changes to the program's operation. Economic hardship made maintaining isolated compounds impossible, while increased government scrutiny of potential fifth-column activities threatened to expose the network. The American Hereditary Improvement Society officially disbanded in 1942, though internal communications make clear this was merely a strategic retreat from public view. "Our work continues through family channels," wrote LaRue in his final circular to Inner Circle members. Each family unit now becomes responsible for maintaining its own records and ensuring appropriate matches for the next generation. The Central Registry will continue operations from the new location discussed at our final gathering. Annual correspondence will maintain our collective direction until circumstances permit a more formal reorganization. The Central Registry, referenced by LaRue, appears to have relocated to a small town in the Texas Hill Country, where it operated under the guise of a genealogical research service. Federal investigators briefly flagged the operation during a sweep of suspected Nazi sympathizers, but found nothing overtly incriminating and closed their investigation by 1944. What these investigators missed was the sophisticated coding system used in the registry's records, a system that concealed the ongoing tracking of hundreds of descendants from Eleanor's original program. Each birth, marriage, and death was carefully documented, along with detailed physical and intellectual assessments of new generations. The post-war period saw the network adapt once again, embracing the language of genetics rather than eugenics, and establishing several legitimate-seeming research foundations. The Bellerose Medical Research Foundation, established in 1952, focused on hereditary factors in human health and development, and provided scholarships to descendants of the program who pursued careers in medicine, genetics, and related fields. Martha Wilson, whose grandmother had been one of the children born at Bellerose Plantation, provided rare insight into how families within the network experienced their participation during this era. In an oral history recorded in 1993, but sealed until her death in 2015, Wilson described growing up aware of her special lineage. "My parents never used the Bellerose name, but they made sure I understood we were part of something important, a family with a distinguished heritage that needed to be preserved." When I reached dating age, they began arranging coincidental meetings with young men from other families in the network. I was shown photographs of my ancestors and told I had a responsibility to maintain certain family traits. It wasn't until I was engaged to my husband, who I later learned had been selected for me years earlier, that my father revealed the full history of our family's connection to the Bellerose experiment. Wilson's testimony reveals how the program survived through family indoctrination, with each generation raised to value the continuation of the bloodline above personal choice. More disturbing still, her account suggests that many participants came to embrace their role in what they perceived as an elite hereditary project. "We were taught to see ourselves as special, carriers of superior traits that set us apart from the general population." Family gatherings included subtle evaluations of the children, noting which ones showed the strongest Bellerose qualities. There was immense pressure to excel, to prove the program's success through our achievements. Those who rebelled or questioned the family traditions were gradually excluded from inner circle knowledge and events. By the 1960s, the network had evolved sophisticated methods for maintaining their breeding program within the constraints of modern society. Computer technology allowed for more complex genetic tracking, while the social upheaval of the era provided cover for introducing new bloodlines to prevent inbreeding, always carefully selected based on desired traits. A leaked internal document from 1967, attributed to the Continuation Committee, outlined modern operational protocols. Regional coordinators must maintain plausible deniability regarding direct matchmaking. Preferred methods include educational channels, shared scholarships, specialized summer programs, professional networking, strategic internship placements, and social integration, coordinated vacation planning, joint family events. The subject's perception of free choice must be maintained while guiding selection within approved parameters. The true extent of the network's reach by the late 20th century remains difficult to assess. Conservative estimates based on birth records and known family connections suggest that by 1990 there may have been between 2,000 and 5,000 individuals directly descended from Eleanor's original program, though many would have been unaware of their heritage or only peripherally involved in continuing the bloodline project. More alarming are the positions of influence these descendants appeared to achieve with suspicious frequency. A confidential analysis conducted by a private security firm in 2003 noted the statistically improbable concentration of individuals sharing certain genetic markers, later connected to Bellerose descendants, in fields including medicine, law, finance, and politics throughout the southern United States. The digital age brought new challenges and opportunities for the network. Internet genealogy services and DNA testing threatened to expose connections that had remained hidden for generations. Yet these same technologies also provided new ways to identify potential matches and coordinate activities across greater distances. Evidence suggests the modern incarnation of the Bellerose network operates primarily through private social media groups, encrypted communications, and exclusive dating services that cater to heritage-conscious professionals. These platforms allow for the continuation of Eleanor's program without the need for the more obvious control mechanisms of earlier eras. Dr. Elizabeth Chambers, a genetic anthropologist who has studied the phenomenon, published a controversial paper in 2017 suggesting that the Bellerose experiment represents perhaps the longest-running and most successful private eugenics program in human history. What began as one woman's disturbing obsession has evolved into a self-perpetuating system that has successfully transmitted both genetic traits and cultural practices across more than 6 generations. Most remarkably, it has done so while adapting to dramatic social changes, legal obstacles, and technological revolutions. The network's resilience suggests a level of organizational sophistication that far exceeds what we would expect from a 19th-century origin point. Chambers' research identified several distinctive genetic markers that appear with unusual frequency in individuals suspected of Bellerose descent, though she cautions that these markers alone cannot prove connection to the original breeding program. More telling, she argues, are the distinctive social patterns that persist among families in the network. We observe statistically significant patterns of educational clustering, geographic mobility following predictable patterns, and marriage age demographics that differ markedly from regional norms. These families tend to have fewer children than the general population, but invest more heavily in their education and development, consistent with a quality over quantity approach to hereditary continuation. In 2019, an anonymous whistleblower claiming to be a 30th-generation descendant of the original program provided documents to several journalists detailing what they called the contemporary continuation. These documents, whose authenticity remains disputed, described an organization now operating globally through legitimate-seeming educational foundations, exclusive social clubs, and specialized dating services catering to exceptional individuals with an interest in heritage. Most disturbing was the whistleblower's claim that the modern network had embraced advanced reproductive technologies, including genetic screening and selective embryo implantation, to accelerate and refine their program. What Eleanor accomplished through crude, forced pairings, the current leadership achieves through cutting-edge genetic science, always maintaining plausible deniability through the guise of family health planning. While the whistleblower's claims generated brief media interest, the story was quickly overshadowed by other news and no major investigation materialized. The families implicated, many now wealthy and influential, dismissed the allegations as conspiracy theories and threatened legal action against anyone repeating the claims. Yet occasionally, strange connections emerge that lend credibility to the whistleblower's account. In 2021, data analysts identified an unusual pattern of financial transactions connecting several heritage-focused educational charities to a private fertility clinic specializing in genetic screening. The clinic's client list reportedly included numerous individuals whose ancestry could be traced to the regions where Eleanor's program operated in the 19th century. For most Americans, the Bellerose experiment remains an obscure historical footnote, if they've heard of it at all. Official histories of slavery and its aftermath rarely mention Eleanor's breeding program, focusing instead on more documented atrocities. Academic studies of American eugenics typically begin with the more formal movements of the early 20th century, overlooking the darker precedent established on a Louisiana sugar plantation decades earlier. This historical amnesia serves the interests of those who may still be carrying forward Eleanor's vision. In the absence of public awareness or scrutiny, the network has been free to evolve and adapt, maintaining its core purpose while shedding the more obvious markers that might attract unwanted attention. Today, the site of the original Bellerose plantation lies beneath a housing development built in the 1990s. No historical marker commemorates the 12 forced marriages that Eleanor arranged, or the horrifying auction, where she displayed the first fruits of her breeding program to her fellow planters. The physical evidence has been erased, the documents scattered or destroyed, and the witnesses long silenced by death or intimidation. Yet the bloodlines she established continue to flow through American society, carrying forward a legacy of calculated breeding that has outlasted slavery, survived the Civil War, adapted to the Industrial Revolution, and embraced the digital age. The descendants of Eleanor's special project now number in the thousands, though few recognize the dark origin of their carefully maintained family traditions. In 2023, a graduate student researching patterns in genetic testing databases noticed an anomaly, a distinctive genetic signature appearing with unusual frequency among successful professionals in certain fields. Her academic advisors discouraged further investigation, citing privacy concerns and the potential for misinterpretation of normal family clustering. Shortly afterward, she received an unexpected job offer from a prestigious research foundation that required her immediate relocation across the country. Her preliminary findings were never published, and her research data disappeared from university servers in what was described as a routine system update. When contacted by other researchers interested in her work, she politely declined to discuss her previous project, saying only that she had moved on to more productive areas of study. This pattern of curtailed investigations and diverted attention has repeated throughout the decades whenever someone comes too close to uncovering the full scope of the Bellerose experiment and its modern continuation. Careers are redirected, research funding disappears, data is lost, and public interest wanes before any definitive conclusions can be reached. Meanwhile, in exclusive gatherings at private estates, in encrypted online forums, and in the careful matchmaking practiced by certain families, Eleanor Bellerose's vision continues to unfold according to plans laid down more than a century and a half ago. The physical traits she selected, the height, the distinctive features, the intellectual capacities appear with remarkable consistency in each new generation, testifying to the horrifying effectiveness of her methods. And somewhere, perhaps in a secure digital vault or a climate-controlled archive accessible only to the inner circle, the records continue, tracking bloodlines, noting promising individuals, and planning matches for future generations. The leather-bound ledger where Eleanor recorded her first 12 marriages has given way to sophisticated genetic profiles and predictive algorithms, but the purpose remains unchanged: the perpetuation of what she believed to be superior human stock, cultivated like prize roses in the garden of American society. If you trace your family history to Louisiana or the surrounding states, if you find unusual gaps or inconsistencies in your ancestry during the mid-19th century, if certain physical or intellectual traits appear with remarkable consistency throughout your family tree, you might unknowingly be carrying forward the legacy of Eleanor Bellerose's horrifying auction. The blood of her carefully selected breeding stock may flow in your veins, your very existence a testament to her disturbing vision of human improvement through selective breeding. And perhaps most unsettling of all, somewhere, someone may be tracking your bloodline, noting your accomplishments and considering your potential contribution to the continuation of a program begun in 1856 on a sugar plantation along Bayou Teche. For in the shadows of American society, beyond public awareness or governmental oversight, the work continues.